hard for us to grasp holiness, especially to the magnitude of God's holiness. But if we can somewhat grasp that and take hold of that, and that His plan is far better than anything of this world, anything this world throws at us, we can follow that. And it's not easy. As I was saying, I fail almost every time. But if we can just keep our eye at the end of the tunnel and see the light, and we can keep going towards Jesus, if we just see that that's where we need to go. Which it's hard at the time to see that something's better later. I'm awful at procrastination. And I say, oh, I'll do that later. I'll rather just play video games now. And then my reasoning is, well, I'm going to have fun now. I'm going to have fun later. So I'll just have fun now. Awful ideology. But it's so easy to just take the pleasures of the world now and not look at what God has to offer us later. But if we can see how perfect He is, we can keep going in that direction towards Him. We can get through all of these things that the world throws at us. Could you imagine a church that is totally grounded in the faith? No matter what the world throws at them, they're always following God, just relentlessly. How much of a testimony that would be if I don't know, like if a church stays around someone who has cancer, and the person with cancer just keeps coming to church, maybe not even coming to church, but is still within the church body, and just how much of a testimony it would be for a whole church, not just like a church, not just this church, I mean the church, all the churches put together. If we could just stay on that rock that we have of Jesus and our faith in Him, if we can just stay on that, no matter what the world throws at us, we'll be fine. Because the world just goes with whatever comes at them. That's part of the world, just take it easy, bro. That's the world's thought process. Just go with the flow. Figure it out. We're called to be different. Holy. God. We need to stay grounded. So the band's going to be coming up to play some music. I just made myself laugh in my head joke. That's so silly. It wasn't even a funny joke. That's the worst part. So, I was saying how holy God is. We need to keep our eye on that. The Bible talks about what God's like in heaven when Jesus is on His throne. And it talks about how the angels are constantly worshiping Him. There's constant singing of his name, praises, being something. That's where He was before He came down to earth. He humbled Himself from being a king, which He's always a king. But He was up there on the throne in perfect place, heaven. He was in heaven, being worshipped by angels. He came down here, and He was born in a feeding trough. A lot of times manger makes it sound like, oh, Jesus was born in a manger. That sounds nice. No, it was a feeding trough. It's where the animals would eat from. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but they're gross. They're disgusting. He left that throne and came to a feeding trough where He was then raised. And also, I actually thought about this today. He could have come now, and look at all the stuff we have. Would have been so much more comfortable. He was born back then when they didn't really have too much cool stuff. It wasn't very comfortable living. He grew up there in the Middle East. He was rejected by his family. And that's what I was saying. James was his brother. it talks about James and the rest of his brothers kicking Jesus out of the house during his ministry. He came here, he came to his home while he was in his ministry. He came home and stayed with his family. His family kicked him out, his brothers. He was kicked out of his own house, betrayed by his own people, to Rome, where he was beaten and tortured, then hung on a cross. And the crazy thing about the cross was, he was dying so slowly that the Romans were like, I gotta go home, let's speed this up. So they stabbed him with a spear while he was on the cross, so he could suffocate on his own blood. That's how they killed him. So he was buried, and he came back. He would die again, and he went back to his throne. And he did that all because he loves us so much. He loves us more than he loves being in heaven with the angels. He died so we could be with him. And the cool thing about this is in James, where as I was saying, he kicked him out of his house. He said, you can't be here. But the first part of this, I always thought was so cool. James says, he introduces himself as James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. Bondservant is like another word for slave. So he went from kicking Jesus out of his house to saying, you are the Lord and I am a slave to you. Which sounds bad, but that's great. Being a slave to Jesus. He's perfect, and that's all we can ask for. So with heads bowed and eyes closed,